Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Mindful Matters. And today we've actually got quite a unique episode in the sense that we're going to be talking about creative thinking. And I've got a very special guest here today with me. I'm your host, Badi Ahmed, and today I've got with myself Roshaan Pervaiz. How are you, my brother?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Not too bad, alhamdulillah myself. Today, as you know, we can see with all these beautiful artworks in the background, yourself being an artist. Tell us about how did you kind of get into the journey of, first of all, wanting to do art? Like, did you naturally already have that talent at a young age? And how did you follow through with that?
It's a bit of a process, really. Mm-hmm. For me personally, I started at a very young age. I think my earliest memory is like 8 or 9 years old. Back when, I don't know if you remember or not, but Cheese TV used to be on before school.
Yeah, was it like, Dragon Ball Z?
Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, all the good stuff.
Right.
I remember my brother and I would wake up early morning and would watch those cartoons and come home from school. We'd jump on the computer, put up a photo of like Trunks or something, and then sit there and draw together basically. And I enjoyed that time. I enjoyed creating something, and then like we compared as well. We'd be like, all right, I drew this better. No, I drew this better. So we had that competitive nature.
So from young, it was always like kind of your go-to after school?
Go-to, yeah, absolutely. Because it was fun. We enjoyed it. And we loved the cartoons as well. And then obviously as time progressed on, I was like, okay, you know what? I can draw cartoons. Can I draw animals?
Right.
And then that challenging yourself in terms of, okay, I can do this, but can I do something a bit more complex, something more difficult? And then once I got to that stage, I was like, okay, I can draw animals. Can I draw people? And then that again is more challenging, is more complicated. It's a far more restrictive art form, portrait drawing. And I think my earliest memory of like a portrait, I think the first portrait I ever drew was of Shah Rukh Khan, I think it was.
Right.
And
is there like a backstory behind it?
Oh, sort of. I drew it, and then I remember my mum, she put it up on the fridge, and I was like, oh no. And then my cousin came over one day, and she was like, is that Shah Rukh Khan? I was like, no way. Can you recognize?
Someone recognized.
I was so happy. And then that satisfaction, that happiness, I was like, you know what? I created something that somebody's recognized.
Yeah.
And even though it wasn't all that great, I was like, you know what?
It worked.
It worked. I was like, if you can recognize it, it does the job. Yeah. But I think the most prominent memory that I have of a artistic experience was there was this guy in my brother's year in high school. And he drew this drawing of Trunks that was 1-to-1. It was perfect. And I remember walking into school and there was like a huge crowd of people around him and everyone was just like in awe of this drawing. And I looked at it and I was like, that's amazing. And then having that experience, I was like, you know what? That's something that you want to give to other people because you want to show somebody something that they haven't seen before.
Did you like kind of feel yourself like, I know I can draw well, and if this person got such a reception, such a crowd as a result of that, I'm going to go chase that as well?
That was periodic because obviously the more I drew, I learnt from the mistakes that I was making. Okay, I did this wrong. How can I make this better? And then when I'd create something and show it to people, they'd be like, oh wow, this is different. I haven't seen this before. And then that experience that person had, and that's the happiness that you get. That's like, you know what, I've shown this person something that he hasn't seen, and
he's happy as a result, and
that's
what gives you the self-fulfillment.
Exactly, yeah, absolutely. But it's just about giving somebody that experience, really. With this form of art style, it's very common because everybody loves drawing. Everybody loves pencil drawings.
Is it like a specific word for the art form that you use, or
predominantly it's referred to as hyper-realism.
Okay.
But obviously that's a very later on stage. I started off with just
drawing sketches,
and absolutely terrible at it. I was like, you know what?
Speaking of terrible, I can hardly draw a box.
Now you say that, but like 10 years, trust me, you keep doing it, you'll get better, 100%.
Hopefully, I'm not going to give myself I
wouldn't bet on that. But no, but that's the thing, because like, I mean, you're terrible now, but if you keep that mentality of, you know what, I might not be good at something today, but if I keep doing it over a period of time, I will improve, and 100% you'll improve.
Is it like that quote from memories from Will Smith? It's like, if you lay one brick well, eventually you would build a wall rather
Absolutely.
than thinking to yourself, I'm going to build a wall
Exactly.
and then how to do that, right?
Absolutely. You don't start from the end result. I didn't wake up and say, you know what, I want to draw on hyper-realism, and suddenly I could. I'd be an absolute freak if I could. But you start off by being very mediocre. You start off by being very average. You start off by making mistakes, and making mistakes consistently and doing things wrong over and over again until it's not is how you improve.
So just like for my reference, right, when you first make something and then you go, okay, that's not up to scratch, how many times do you kind of redraw it? Or like this is at the sort of, for you, your beginning phase, right? How many times would you redraw something, scrap it, draw it again until you kind of went, okay, this is something I'm happy with?
You take gaps with any form of creativity, because obviously you do if you keep doing it over and over again, one, you'll burn yourself out, and two, you'll lose your passion for it. Right. So if you do something, like if you draw something, for example, so a good way to measure it would be to draw the same thing again after a certain period of time.
Right.
I think so. The first time that I did that, 10 years ago, I think I drew Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. And it was absolutely terrible.
This is just instant nostalgia as soon as
yeah, 100%. I was like, and then in 2015, I drew him again to compare how I had progressed within the 5-year gap.
Right.
And I was able to see, okay, I made these mistakes, and obviously I was able to improve on that. Obviously, drawing in between that time, I was able to understand or improve on textures more. Okay, how can I draw skin better? And I was able to do that by drawing other things, like I draw eyes, or I draw like a nose or lips, and so it's a collective progress, but a good way to measure would be to do the same thing over and over again.
Right. Do you find like, so for me, right, in my kind of journey with art and, just being creative, it kind of died out in year 8, right? And that was the last time I was required to do a, advertisement as part of a marketing assignment. And then after that is kind of like, I look back and then I think, wow, for, a good 10 years now, I haven't, done anything creative. And it's like, I guess it kind of ties down, in our culture that it's just you kind of focus on a career that pays well, and you just, you're told by your parents, just focus purely on that. And then everything else that's, that's on the side in terms of expressing yourself, art is just like, leave that to the side, just focus on your studies. I wanted to ask you, A, is there scope to kind of turn this something into a career? And B, how do we kind of stop ourselves from just dying down in our creative phase and kind of just delving into the kind of mindset that career is everything and art is just, a bit of a waste of time, which of course it isn't, because art is something beautiful. Naturally, as humans, we aspire to beautiful things, right?
It's definitely a challenge because obviously I doubt there's any parent out there that would say, hey, you know what, don't do engineering, do art as a career. That's not going to happen. It's
my parents, having heard that, are probably cheering. Right
really? No way.
Like, yes.
I mean, no, it's difficult because obviously you do want a career that pays well. So you want financial stability first and foremost. And obviously there's no guarantee with this sort of thing. There definitely wasn't a guarantee 10 years ago, but now with more social media platforms coming on board, like you've got Instagram, TikTok and Reels and stuff, there's more of a scope for something to be built out of nothing, because obviously we all have phones, we're all on the me, we know we're in that generation where we're growing up with these things and they're far more accessible as well. And obviously every child has a creative nature in them. Everybody likes creating something or painting or drawing or on the iPad, like painting on the iPad as well. So, I mean, having that drive and not letting it die in this generation, I feel like is the most impactful as opposed to what it was 10 years ago. Having that opportunity now, I feel like, and being able to avail that opportunity, there's more of a chance of that happening than there was 10 years ago. But yeah, I mean, when you think about it, I mean, creating a career from something like this is incredibly satisfying because it's something that's very intrinsic, because we all have experiences, we all have a past that we try and illustrate to others as well. So having a professional life, yes, but obviously if you have a passion or a drive for something that on the side, whether if it's sports or anything creative for that matter, something where you can come home after work at 7-8 o'clock and
just
you're
relax,
wind down, switch off the brain, and just, you know what, I want to cut off the ward for a bit. And I just want to do something that's very, you know, whether it's if it's creating music or if it's creating something or drawing for that matter.
For you, is this like a kind of like relief, like
Absolutely.
you know, given the stresses of work, given the stresses of just life in general, this is like kind of you time. Right?
Absolutely, because I mean, we're all in the corporate life. When there's 9-to-5 jobs, everyone gets into it. Everybody works. I mean, it's the way of the world.
3 hours you've got. You know, when you come home, wake up the next day, it's the same thing over again.
Exactly. It's you get into that repetitive cycle, which is quite dangerous because obviously you need something to, you know, you need some sort of relief. You need something to relax you down and calm you down. So,
couldn't agree more.
Sorry.
Like, you know, I couldn't agree more because,
100%.
you know, like, at the end of the day, I think we kind of stagnate. I think that's the word. Like, where we kind of just stop at a point and then we're just doing the same thing over and over again.
100%.
I did want to ask, like, with something like art, you know, art's multifaceted. It's not just drawings. You know, art could be in the form of sport. Art could be in the form of, you know, aesthetics. In every career, like, I guess, however we do it, there's always innovation, innovative thinking. Creative or being creative then dives into innovation, you know, finding new and impactful ways of doing things. Do you find that for all of us, art and being creative is just as important as making sure we're on top of our studies in some form or fashion?
Absolutely, yeah. Because, I mean, again, like I said, I mean, we all study. There's always that aspect of the professional life developing, which obviously subsides and works in conjunction with the creative life as well. Because we all have a intrinsic desire to do something that's not time restricted or that's not impacted by finances, for example. Because as soon as you start putting money or a timeline or a deadline or anything creative even, you'll start feeling that the hobby itself will start to feel a bit more restricted because it's no longer something that you want to do. It's something that you have to do. Okay. So making sure the two work hand in hand is, and if you can find that happy medium, and obviously now with everything being so accessible and so easy, it's so much more easier to do than it was back in like 10 years ago or something. So, I mean, absolutely 100% agree that you need some form of creative release subsiding from the professional life that you're in, because it can't just be about studies. It can't just be about going to work and doing that 9 to 5.
Because otherwise life just gets boring.
Like, it gets boring because, I mean, you do it repetitively and it's like there's nothing else to do basically. And obviously something like this, it's not only beneficial to yourself, it gives other people something to look at, something different to experience. I mean, you might connect with it differently as opposed to what I've intended. It might carry a different story for you. You might carry something completely different as opposed to what I might have intended. So, I mean, giving somebody that opportunity, not necessarily them creating that opportunity, but them simply just scrolling through Instagram, for example, hey, what's this? What does the crown mean? What does the hand mean?
Right.
That intrinsic thought that's triggered is what's so satisfying with this type of art.
Speaking of, this beautiful drawing that you've got up here, I believe is titled the Victory, right?
Right there, yep.
The way I see it, you've got hands holding what I assume is the European crown, right? The crown of the King of England. And on top of that, you've got our beautiful Masjid Beit al-Futuh sitting on top of the ground. So the way I see it, it's like victory of Islam across ages, so much so that it's actually sitting on top of the current crown as we see it, right?
Yep. And there's obviously, I mean, the reason why this form of art style and why I've chosen to do it basically, as opposed to, let's say, commission work and portrait drawings. Portrait drawings I've always found to be very two-dimensional. Like if I wanted to draw freedom, I would draw Nelson Mandela. If I wanted to draw equality, I could draw Martin Luther King. Yep. It's two-dimensional in the fact that what it portrays and what it conveys to you. If you saw a portrait of Martin Luther King, you would understand, okay, equality, but there's not much else that would be added onto that or could be expanded upon that. You might appreciate it from an artistic standpoint and say, hey, It looks really real. The skin textures are good. The highlights, the shadows, from an artistic standpoint.
But is it like the meaning's really limited?
The
into
meaning's
how much
really
you can-
restricted. It's two-dimensional, whereas this is very interpretive.
Yeah.
How you interpreted just now, somebody who doesn't know anything about Ahmadiyyat or somebody like external would be able to interpret that in a different manner from their own experiences. But that was the initial intention, to show the crown of England and having Batul Futu on there as well. So again, that having that three-dimensional understanding of something that's not very three-dimensional at all gives that illustrative experience to anyone that looks at it. And that's why I don't more so go towards portrait drawing, because it's like I can't do much with it. There's not that much storytelling, whereas this, your story might be different to how you interpret it as opposed to somebody else.
So for you as an artist, you're kind of more fulfilled when there's a story to tell in what you make, right?
Because we all have a past, we all have experiences that we've been through, and obviously being able to convey that in a visual representation and allowing the audience to look at it and interpret it and connect with it in their own way, in their own personal manner, that is far more gratifying to myself and far more fulfilling as a creative, as opposed to just drawing somebody repetitively. And like if you saw a drawing of like let's say I don't know, like Shah Rukh Khan or something, you would scroll past on Instagram, you'd be like, oh, it's a drawing of Shah Rukh Khan. And cool. That's it. You wouldn't think much of it. Whereas if you came across something like this, you would look at it and you'd be like, oh wow, okay, so what does this mean? What is it trying to tell me? So there's that element of exploring the human mind and giving that audience or tapping into that train of thought that isn't otherwise explored very often, which art obviously allows.
With art, right? Like for me, whenever I see art of different forms, I associate it with certain memories. I associate it with certain time periods, and also certain cultures. Do you feel there's a space for Ahmadi art and Ahmadi aesthetic that 200 years from now someone could look at and be like, that is what Ahmadiyyat stood for, or this is like the Ahmadi sort of form of art? And the reason I sort of say that is because across the sort of history of Islam, different empires had a different sort of form of art. And when we look at these buildings still standing today, like for example, the Blue Mosque in Turkey, the way that those, minarets are made, the way that those are designed, that is rather reminiscent of, I guess, the Turkish Islamic aesthetic. Is there room we could have a similar kind of, I guess,
like a motif, so to speak, in the art world for Ahmadis?
Exactly.
Absolutely. Because the reason why I transversed into drawing more about Ahmadiyyat and incorporating the Ahmadi like the image into my artwork was there's 130 year history 130 odd year history that we have of persecution, of sacrifice, of suffering that we've endured throughout the years.
And actually not many people know about it, unfortunately.
And there's not that much, there's a lot that's been written about, documented, there's poems, there's lots that's been said about, but in the fine arts world, there's still something that's yet to be described or recognized as, hey, you know what, that's Ahmadi like architecture or Ahmadi art style. Like obviously, the main thing that the mind goes towards is the Alayhi Sallahu Bigaf Abdul ring. Majority of Ahmadis,
as soon as you see that,
you know that's an Ahmadi.
Right?
Because that's not a quote of the Quran that's often quoted, and obviously whenever something like that is artistically portrayed, instantly you're like, you know what, that's an Ahmadi drew that, you can tell. So there is that space absolutely for a motif to be created or something to be created where we have a global image. And obviously there's still time for that. Art isn't something that's very common. It's not something that's very widely explored.
So maybe like for us as young Ahmadi Muslims, this is kind of our signal to say there is this space.
There is this
go
space.
And create it.
Absolutely. There is that space where something needs to be created, and if you have that drive, if you have that passion, if you have the ideologies behind and how you want to approach it towards your audience, there's a massive audience where you can not only convey the message of Islam, Ahmadiyyat, but also that opens up dialogue. Because obviously, from making these drawings, often I'll get questions about, hey, what mosque is this? Why did you draw Dr. Abdul Salam? Why did you draw this mosque? What does the ring mean? And then that creates dialogue, that creates conversations.
And then from those conversations, people will dive into Islam Ahmadiyyat.
Exactly.
Why is this, particular version of Islam the best version of Islam?
Absolutely. It provokes people's thoughts. It forces them to think about things, and again, coming back to why I don't do portrait drawings, is that you can't get that sort of experience from just being that two-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, I say that, and then I drew Imran Khan, but from that, it was really interesting as well, because although there were a lot of Pakistanis that liked the fact that I drew Imran Khan, there was a lot of people were oblivious to the actual persecution of Ahmadi. So I was able to highlight for them sections 298B, 298C of the Pakistani Penal Code and show them this is the persecution that's happening on your land. This is what's happening.
And your leader, for example, hasn't
done anything. So it's not just the artistic standpoint that I was able to do. I was like, you know what? I have an opportunity here to basically show people what's going on. Yeah. Because majority of Pakistanis, they're obviously we live in an age where most people are very much aware of injustices. They're very liberal. Everyone has equal rights. We all understand these things. Our moral compasses are starting to shift towards equality. Mm-hmm. So now more than ever, it's much more easier to convey these messages and show these are the injustices that are happening towards Islam Ahmadiyyat in Pakistan, and be able to expand on that from an artistic standpoint.
It's such a noble sort of, I guess, way of expressing yourself as well. I guess there's vulgar art, art that, for example, draws upon things that aren't modest, etc. But within art itself, you can express Islam, you can express, injustices that are faced by Ahmadis, you can express different art forms, you can almost write history. Absolutely. In that sense as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And I did want to ask you, in the previous episode, we talked about music and how someone who's really good at music may want to become a musician, but how being in the music industry in itself could be sort of a, dialogue between, am I going into an industry that challenges my faith? And so we asked, what are some ways that you can, push your creative drive into channels that influence the Jamaat positively? And how does, your work, of course, when I see it, I see such a positive image of the ways, we can do creative work for the Jamaat. Could you touch on that a bit?
With art and with this particular form of art style, and the way that I've always approached it is that in front of you, there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to break every reality, bend every truth. There's nothing stopping me from drawing a hand holding a crown. There's nothing stopping me from drawing a heart hanging on a hook. These are all artistic liberties. So when you have that creative freedom on paper, and if you're able to illustrate that towards your audience, and if you can create that drive and be able to, I want to do this, but I want to portray Islam Ahmadiyyat, then obviously you have that three-dimensional, but then you also have that storytelling that goes with it. So having that fundamental understanding that, this is something that can be used for the betterment of not only myself, but also everyone else that views my art and understands what Islam is and understands what Ahmadiyyat is and gets on the right side of history, so to speak. Yep. Having that creative freedom and being able to utilize it in a positive way, that's able to influence people's thoughts, that's able to change people's perspectives and understandings of the reality that they live in, and be like, hey, this is happening and I don't even know about it. Being able to do that is incredibly powerful, and being able to do that effectively is incredibly liberating.
So early on you mentioned, that you did draw portraits of specific people, be that Shah Rukh Khan, Imran Khan, but in Islam there are specific hadiths that condemn drawing portraits. How did you reconcile that, as of course you matured as an artist?
Portrait drawing in Islam, contextually speaking, is prohibited in a certain context. Mm-hmm. Historically in Islamic, and I think Khalifa Rabi touched on this as well as the current Khalifa as well. Regardless if it's portrait drawing or any form of creativity or any form of artwork, if it's created with the underlying intention for worshipping, then obviously that's prohibited, because obviously the underlying message there, therefore, is not so much the artwork itself, but for the purpose of worshipping. So anything that's along those lines, and historically, that is what happened during the lifetime of the Holy Prophet ﷺ as well, that there were portraits made, that there were paintings made that were made solely for the purpose of idol worshipping as well. But, I mean, historically speaking, I mean, Islam doesn't prohibit. There's never been an instance where a landscape has been painted and it's been prohibited, or a portrait has been painted simply for the artistic beauty of it. That's been prohibited.
So it's like for artistic purposes.
Yes.
Then art is kind of freedom. It's up to you. But when we kind of dive into making portraits of people for the sake that this drawing is then going to be worshipped down the line, or represent a sort of higher figure of that person, then that's Islamically speaking, then that's a no-go.
Absolutely. Yep, that's it.
Moving on, I did want to touch about, like there's so many beautiful artworks that you've got here. And of course, each of these has such a high amount of detail in them, and how much time it takes to even make these. Like when you do draw these, is it just, you draw it at once? Does it take, multiple stages? How long does it take, to make your best artwork, as you mentioned to me earlier, in this eye, from start to finish? What was the process like?
It's lengthy. Obviously it's not something that
I could imagine
starts and finishes. I wish that was the case. I could start it and finish in one day. Means the eye particularly, that took around 3 months, over 70 hours.
70 hours on a single piece of art. Wow.
So it was like basically starting at, I'd come home from work at 7 o'clock and then eat, and then 10 p.m. I'd draw until like 1 a.m. and then go to sleep. That's the process. But I mean, it's something that takes time. Something that takes.
It's really rigorous. Like it's not like just you do it and then that's it.
There are times where it's so draining as well, because obviously you're that focused into it, and you get to a point where you're like, you know what, I just want to finish this. Like I can't do it. And obviously, once you get into that mentality, that's where you stop. That's like, you know what, I can't do this right now. I need to put it away. But obviously 3 months, as well as these other ones as well. I mean, I think that one took around 1 month, and that was like 30 odd hours, I think it was.
Like even for 1 month, just to think about like the whole process from when you thought of that to sketching it out, drawing it with all those different shades. It's really impressive, to be able to do this in a month.
The most difficult thing that I've always found is not the actual drawing itself, but the planning that goes into it.
Okay.
The most time that's spent, and I don't really sit down and brainstorm ideas and go, you know what, this is what I want to draw. This is the idea that I want. I don't brainstorm ideas at all.
Do you like kind of just put pen on paper and then it just happens?
It hits me when it hits me. I remember when I think on my Instagram there's the motorbike drawing, and the next drawing that I did was 5 months after that, because I had nothing. I was like, you know what, I don't know what to do. And creating for the sake of creating and for the sake of being consistent, that's where you lack quality.
Right. Yeah.
So I was like, you know what, if nothing's hitting me now, I'm not going to force it.
So for you, quality control is really like when that idea hits you and hits you hard, and then you have to, sort of draw then and there.
Yeah, so I remember the drawing that I did with the man with the wings. I was driving home from work one day, and I had the Arabic Qasida that's written by the promised Messiah, Islam, in praise of the Holy Prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I remember the last couplet that was recited, that where it's recited, "Ki jismi yatiru ilayka min shawqin ala ya layta kanat quwwatu tayrani," that my body yearns to fly towards you out of love. With that, I had the power to fly.
Beautiful.
And when I've listened to the Qasida numerous times, and I mean, but at that moment I was like, you know what, I need to be able to convey that in a visual sense. I need to be able to portray that in another way that hasn't been portrayed before. So that's where the idea sparked off from. I was like, all right, you know what? How can I convey flight, wings? How can I convey something spiritual, a person praying? So the ideas and the symbolisms come together when the idea comes. It's not forced. It needs to be natural. Otherwise, it's like, you know what?
And see, like to me, seeing this artwork, like pretty much it's the feeling you get when you've had a self-fulfilling namaz, like once you've just finished it. That artwork pretty much captures that exact moment. The way you've kind of thought it out and the way you've drawn it, it's such an amazing sort of just thing to look at, and remind yourself of the beauty and the power of prayer. And like with art, like that's the kind of trains of thoughts that we can get looking at art, experiencing art.
There has to be that experience in it, because obviously when I was listening to when the Qasida was playing in the car, and obviously when that verse was recited, I was like, you know what? I mean, it's had such an impact. I was like, if I can create something that impacts people and forces them to obviously listen to the Qasida again, and obviously gives them that different understanding and different perspective of not only themselves, but also forces them to experience something else that's more spiritual in a sense. Because obviously the drawing itself, there's nothing else that's going on. It's a very calmly reflected drawing. So to give you that experience was good.
Yeah. No, I think myself and the audience, like, we're actually quite grateful that you know, like, that you did decide to draw that and, you know, go ahead with that. So brilliant stuff.
But yeah, I mean, there's other drawings that are obviously influenced from personal experiences, because obviously they take so long. Like, there's 2 months. That's a lot of time that passes in between.
Do you find that across drawing these drawings that your life changes and your experiences are changing with this drawing, with this artwork?
Yeah, definitely. Because obviously, like 3 months is a long time. 2 months is a long time. There's a lot of life that happens in between. And there's a lot that impacts you personally or from your experiences that, you know what, this happened. Like, I'll start a drawing and it'll start with a different perspective, and then something will happen. It'll change because of that passage of time, basically. Yeah. That's natural.
Do you have like a specific example of a time where a significant event happened during a drawing and then that kind of changed the way that the drawing ended out?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's always, because obviously there's a lot of time that passes in between making these drawings, and obviously there's a lot of life that happens in between as well. I remember one particular drawing with the hand of the tree. Here it is, this one here.
There we are.
Absolute masterpiece. There's a bit of a story behind this one, to be completely honest with you. This one, I remember I started it. Obviously, the intention was to draw the ring and incorporate the alayhi sallahu bigafan abduhu ring in.
It was just the one ring at this point, right?
Absolutely. And I think I've got it down here as well, right there. That's
so
alayhi sallahu bigafan abduhu. And I was like, you know, I need to be able to convey that somewhere in the drawing and then that turned out to be like a motif in most of my drawings.
Okay.
And I remember when I was about halfway through the drawing itself, I did most of the tree and about halfway down the hand as well. I remember I put the drawing away and I went to sleep, and I saw this dream where I'm driving and my grandfather's with me in the car, and he hands 3 pencils to me and he says that whatever you're completing or whatever you're doing will be completed with these 3 things, with these 3 pencils.
Perhaps mean 3 rings?
Possible. No? I mean, I didn't think much of it. I woke up, I told my mum about it, and she was like, I didn't really think much of it. And then the next day when I took the drawing back out, that's when I was like, you know what, there's 3 rings that the Promised Messiah had made.
And you were handed 3 pencils.
Exactly. So I was like, that surely corresponds. I was like, all right, the first ring I know.
That must have been a special feeling, you know, like once you've kind of connected the dots.
I mean, again, you can't get that sort of experience from like a portrait drawing. That's why I'm like, you know what, I need to do something different. And when I knew what the first ring was, alayhi salahu bigafan abdu, and the second ring was Mola Bust, and then I had to do some research and find out what the third ring was. And obviously that has a bit of the transliteration more or less is basically that I've planted for you a seed, and this seed shall now grow and flourish, and nothing can hinder it.
So up here we've got, I believe it's a bonsai tree?
Bonsai tree, yeah. In Japanese culture, I believe that represents peace. So I feel like that incorporated it perfectly in terms of what I was trying to convey. And then so I had the 3 rings. The way that I was able to convey them was obviously I've got the alayhi salahu bigafan abdul. And the ring which illustrates the seed being planted and the tree being flourished with the tree itself.
Right.
And then I was like, you know what, how can I incorporate the last one, Mola Bas? So I was like, you know what, I'll just title it Mola Bas. So
so that combined that together with that the
brought
title.
It all together, and that's the experience that happens over the time, because obviously once you do something for so long, your understanding changes. You go through things, you experience things, then that's something that incorporates, that brings into your creative sphere as well. How can I bring this into my life that's more prominent or more illustrative, so to speak? But yeah, that was something that was quite special to me.
Okay, so it's like overall, like the detail, the experiences, the the feelings of self-fulfillment that just one piece of artwork brings you, it really is something special. And, you know, like not only to yourself, to the audience that experiences your artwork, to the audience that sees your artwork as well. And that's, you know, like art is something that transcends time, it transcends boundaries. It's something that, you know, that gives us this meaning. And that's why personally I feel it's so important that, you know, we should chase this particular skill, you know, like whether that be art in your career, whether that be art in, you know, the sport you play, whether that be actual physical drawing. Art to some extent impacts everyone.
Absolutely.
You know whether we like it or not.
100%.
Art is everywhere. Like even from any car you can think of, right? That was thought of in someone's head, that was then drawn on a piece of paper, and then from there it was drawn onto a sketch, which was fed into AutoCAD, and then that then became a whole machine.
You know you're engineering,
right?
you're engineering.
Even in engineering, every building starts off with like a sketch, and then that sketch, you know, it goes through that whole process.
There's a process, Yep.
Exactly right. I did want to ask you, you know, with your artwork, do you have a sort of I guess goal to somehow get this recognized by Hazur himself?
That is the long run, to be completely honest with you. And I've sent a few of my drawings to him. Like I've sent prints. Obviously, I'm not going to send the original; they're too large.
So far, any response?
Unfortunately, no. But I'll keep trying.
Inshallah, he gets it.
Inshallah, one day. But I mean, anything that's Jamaat related or anything that I feel would be of some value, I was like, you know what, I should send it to him. And obviously, I attached like a letter as well, explaining a bit about the art as well.
What would be the pinnacle of your artistic career? Like
I would say I would make it. I would be happy as days if any one of my artworks, if ever it appears in Hazur's office.
Oh, imagine if every Hazur Q&A
I'll be done
on MTA when it gets streamed and your artwork is just in the back.
I'll be done.
That's it. Life's complete.
I can't beat that. Absolutely not.
Right. Which of your art or which of your pieces of art would you say is the one that has the most meaning to you personally, like in terms of your growth as a person to, you know, who you are today?
That's a tough question.
It is, right? Like, you know, given so many options you could choose from,
difficult.
Each with such detail, such meaning.
I really love it's actually not here, the heart drawing that I did with the chain and the hook. That's one of my special ones. Absolutely love it, because obviously being able to convey it stands a lot for different people. It was very fundamental in terms of my development as an artist. But yeah, I mean that's definitely a drawing that's very close to me. I mean, from a professional standpoint, I remember when I finished it, because obviously that has a lot of textures, that has a lot of that was something that I tried. That was the first drawing that I did where I had to completely create the reference myself. So I got a reference of the chain, of the hook, and then the heart, and I composed the images together.
So just to clarify, like, you've just got a blank canvas in front of you, and you have to imagine all these different things coming together to the correct proportion to create the final centered image. It's not that, you know, you can just kind of go, this goes here, and this goes here, and that goes here. As you're kind of going, that whole thought process happens in your mind, doesn't it?
That happens progressively. The best way to break it down would be to break down each individual element and each individual image. So it's not to understand the entire photo in its entirety, it's to break it down. Okay, what does a chain look like? What does the hook look like? What does the heart? And it's not so much understanding what does the heart look like? What does one vein look like? And then breaking it down so you're not overwhelmed with the entire image. You're focused on one tiny little part of it. And that makes it a lot easier to replicate onto paper.
Right. So for you, like, say, like, for example, in this drawing here, you've got a hand, you've got a crown, and you've got a moss. So you would imagine the three as individual pieces.
Yes.
And you would focus on the individual pieces.
Individually as well. So I wouldn't focus on the hand. I would focus on the nail. Right. And I wouldn't focus on the nail. I would focus on one individual line on the nail.
Yeah.
And what's the texture on that? I wouldn't focus on one knuckle. I would focus on the wrinkles on the knuckle.
Yeah, right.
Where does the light hit the knuckle? Where does the shadow create?
And like those I guess shadows that we see, that's all kind of created by you. It's not like light shining
Yeah.
on this artwork. This is you,
No.
utilizing your skill to,
Yep.
rub certain, like graphite out, draw certain graphite in,
Yep.
such a direction that it seems as if light's bouncing off this surface.
Absolutely. Because you have to replicate what you see in reality. Because obviously, wherever there's light, there's darkness. So wherever you create a highlight, you need to create a shadow as well, which is obviously the biggest challenge. Because obviously, the human body is very complex. It's incredibly detailed in terms of fingerprints and each shadow which bounces off. Because obviously, where there's a fingerprint, there's a sight. It's like a wave. So there's a shadow and there's a light side of the fingerprint. So
Wow, it goes to that much
it goes
detail.
you pay attention to it.
Yeah.
There's beauty that other people are oblivious to. So if you can portray that to people and show them this is what you look like the reason why the eye drawing is so profound to me is that it shows people the eye in a way that they usually don't see. And I remember when I finished it, obviously to me, it was an eye drawing. It was practice. It was getting back into the groove because I drew this in 2020.
Right.
And I stopped drawing in 2015 because
So this was like your comeback.
this was exactly, it was like a comeback thing. I was like, you know what, I need to get back into it. So this was the first drawing that I did in 2020, and to me, it was obviously something that I wanted to test out and see, you know what, have I still got it?
Yeah. See, to me, that looks like an 8K image someone's taken off a professional camera. Like it's hard to convince myself someone has created that detail, all those different shadows, the lighting, just of graphite, just pencil on canvas, I guess. Incredible.
Thank you.
Props to you, man. Like, this is serious skill.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, because when I drew it, to me, it was essentially just a test of what I can do and how far I could push the actual pencil and what I could do with it. But I remember there was this guy that I hadn't spoken to in about 10, 12 years. I used to play cricket with him back in it was like 2012 or something like that. And I hadn't spoken to him in a long time. And he randomly saw this drawing and he messages me and he goes, you know what? I underwent eye surgery this year.
Right.
And I nearly lost one of my eyes.
So this would have been
this was
particularly important to him, knowing that this is like something a mate drew.
Absolutely. So I mean, giving him that experience was incredibly special because obviously to me it was just another eye drawing that I've done. I've done millions of eye drawings.
As they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
I like the pun there. That was very cheeky. That was 10 out of 10. That was.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, it connected differently with him. As opposed to what it stood for me. To me, it was just a test of where I am artistically. But to him, it held a lot more value. And to be able to give him that was something that was incredibly special as well. Especially not having any contact with him for like 10 years.
And then
randomly, he's like, thanks for doing it. I was like, he's like, yeah, no worries, mate. I did it.
Speaking of, have you ever kind of sold one of your individual pieces, or
I'm not,
like given any of your individual pieces out, like the actual original piece in itself?
No, these are all originals, and I've not given any of them out. I mean, I don't actively try and market or sell them. Yeah. I mean, there are people that offer or want to buy them. Yeah. But as I said, I mean, they all hold experiences. They all hold a certain experience that I've valued so long, so closely to myself.
See, like I feel with art that is one thing that the artist has to consider, because you've just created such a masterpiece that has such meaning to you.
Yep.
And then for you, kind of just to offload
it's
that
hard
to
to put a price
else.
on it. Yeah, it's hard to put a price on it. And obviously, if you spend 3 months on this, seldom is anyone willing to compensate for the 3 months that you spent on it. And that's why it's so hard to create this into a career. It's hard to compensate for the value of the product in terms of what I'm spending on it, in terms of my own energy, my time. It's hard to compensate for that gap. So
and so like that's where I feel it's not money that kind of drives an artist, that drives this passion. It's more so, I guess, just that self-fulfillment you get out of it.
Absolutely.
And it's so much deeper when it's self-fulfilling rather than just being, I'll make this to sell it and then that's it.
I mean, if that is your goal, then obviously you create things, you closely monitor the market, you look at what's popping.
Maybe make an NFT out of it.
Exactly, 100%. You look at what the people want and then you cater to that audience, basically. Because obviously then you're running a more commercial business, basically. Then it's no longer a hobby. Then it's more so, you know what, I want to make money out of this. What can I do that will sell?
is it at that point the art then controls you? It's not you
Absolutely.
so sort of freely doing this as just your freedom of expression.
Then it's
more
the
so
market
you're doing
that
this to
controls
make money, and then
Yeah. Then it's the market that controls you. Then it's no longer what you want to do. It's what other people want to see. And obviously, if you're getting paid to do that,
yeah,
then happy days. But if you're doing this as a hobby, if you're doing it to make yourself happy, if it's just something that you enjoy doing, I feel like the moment you drift away from that and start bringing a more monetary element into it, that's when you start to question, okay, what is my motive with this? What am I trying to do with this? Am I trying to make a profit out of it, or am I just doing it because I enjoy doing it? And making that gap is often the most difficult thing for people.
Like for you, have you ever been in that situation where you've kind of gone, but why don't I just sell this for money and like revenue rather than just like sort of?
Not necessarily. I mean, I've never drawn particularly for any sort of gain. I just draw because I like drawing. I just like creating.
So like for you, it's always just been an inner passion and just a way to express who you are.
100%. It's just a matter of, you know what, this is something that I can do. How can I do it differently so I can, I can show people something that they haven't seen before, and then that experience is something that's very rewarding, and that's not something that money can buy.
Yeah.
So having that element, and obviously, if someone offers me like 15, 20 grand or something, I'll be like, you know what, 100%.
Maybe.
Sold, mate. 100% it's yours.
Yeah.
But I mean, even then, it would be difficult because obviously the amount of energy that you've put into it and how long you've had it for. And I mean, every time, because I have this hung up at my house, it's on the wall, and to this day, I'll walk past and I'll stop and I'll look at it and I'll be like, you know what?
Yeah, and every time,
like I drew every single
the experience,
100%. Like I could tell you what song I was listening to, at what part of the drawing,
Right.
who I was talking to, or who was standing beside me, what I was eating or something. So they create time capsules, so to speak.
Like as I say, Rome wasn't built in a day. You walk into Rome today and that like instantly reminds you of the like Rome as the civilization back then and all this sorts of, like art as we think about it does transcend time. It like when you look at it, not only is it just the art in itself, it's the whole history behind it. It's the whole time period behind it.
Yep.
So, like in your case, it's the experiences you went through. It's the the emotions, the music, like everything related to just the, I guess, time period that was created.
There's always that deeper element because it's not just making a drawing on a piece of paper. It's really being able to put yourself intrinsically on paper and how well you could convey your own story. There's stories of love to be told. There's stories of tragedies to be told. There's a lot of things that each and every single one of us experience, and being able to convey that artistically is, I feel like it's the greatest power. And coming back onto what I said earlier, having that opportunity on paper and being able to convey that effectively and being able to reach your audience in a way that they haven't been reached before is incredibly special and very empowering. And being able to do that effectively, I feel like it's very unique.
Speaking of it, right? You talk about being able to showcase something in a different and very
that is
nice experience. Mindful Matters, like the whole podcast, the whole experience. Now put it through this artwork here.
That is, yep.
Where you've got the mic, the shadows, our logo, just the graphite highlight. Like, mate,
fair to say you're the only one that will get the original drawing. I was like,
mate, if I could keep this, I'll hang it up right up there every episode. This should be the feature piece.
Wow.
But like in a very true and like real example, like as you said, this right here is a different sort of way to look at a podcast experience, podcasting and art. And there you go.
Exactly. I mean, what you're doing right now and what we're doing right now is a very creative platform in itself, and being able to have that opportunity to speak freely and be able to explore each other and explore each other's minds and experiences. That is what creative thinking is in essence.
And like as we said earlier, creative thinking, whether you like it or not, is in every kind of aspect of our lives.
Aspect, yeah.
Channeling that creative thinking, not only like problem solving. Problem solving could lead to a business venture. It could lead to you being promoted in your workplace because you thought of a different and new way of doing something.
Exactly.
It could be you creating art, which then leads to you becoming an artist and making a profit off it.
Yep.
Or it could just be that you becoming an artist, as in your case, for the sake of self-fulfillment. There's so much to art. There's so much.
There's so many different parallels,
like
and
different ways.
Yep.
So many realities and just expression in itself.
It's just a matter of having that drive, I guess, at the end of the day, regardless of what your medium is and how you choose to express it and how creative you are. If you have that element within you, regardless if it's in your professional career or if it's in your personal life or if it's in a creative sense, if you have that drive to be able to think outside the box and be able to create something out of nothing or create something that's very different as opposed to what's good, because we all think differently. We all have different experiences. So taking on from that and being able to convey that in your own sense and thinking outside of the box and giving somebody something, a new perspective on something, that is incredibly unique.
Something that I did want to ask you is, as young Khadim, what's one practical step we can implement in our daily lives that would channel that, creative thought for the longer term, that will keep us, interested in, making sure that we are being creative, we are finding new innovative ideas to, keep up with ourselves, I guess.
If it makes you happy and if it brings you comfort, do it. I mean, if you, regardless if you're good at it or if you're bad at it, if it brings you internal satisfaction and if it brings you intrinsic satisfaction, 100% pursue it, regardless of what it is. If it's, if it's reading poetry, if it's writing, or if it's creating art, or if it's creating digital art, or if it's creating short films on like platforms and stuff. If it gives you a sense of relief and it brings you peace, 100% pursue it.
So even if it's like, maybe 10, 20 minutes a day, just
making
sure
that
that source of peace,
you're
kind of doing, continuously making it a habit.
As long as it breaks a routine of yours, that's slowly chipping away at your energy. As long as it breaks that routine, and it sort of levels you out. It brings you some form of energy that's relaxing. That gives you some form of relief. If you have something like that, keep that and keep developing it, basically.
And if, for example, you don't have anything such, could drawing art be that first step to,
absolutely, because
finding something creative?
Regardless of the level of skill, we can all draw to some extent.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be the greatest of the greatest artists in the world to be able to, create some form of art. And you don't have to show anyone, as long as, you create something for yourself. You don't have to display it on social media. You don't have to show anyone. As long as it breaks you away from the reality that you're living in and it takes you away from a moment in time and it brings you peace, that's the purpose of creating it, basically. It's not so much to show people when it's obviously there's no other physical or tangible gain from it. It's just bringing you peace. It's just breaking you out of that habit, that routine, which bogs you down over time and forces you to stop and just breathe, relax, create something fun, have some fun, enjoy it.
And in conclusion, there we go. It doesn't have to be something too fancy. It doesn't have to be something
very
perfect.
simplistic. Yeah,
art is pretty much what we decide to make it.
Absolutely.
If you enjoy it, if it brings you peace, just for ourselves, as young Khadim, to channel that inner creative thought, to inspire ourselves over the long term. Just find something that gives us peace, and I guess just making sure that we pursue it, that we continue on with it. And on that note, if there are any further questions that you guys have to us, we've got here, I guess, Roshaan more specifically in regards to his drawings, the detail in his drawings, as you guys will see or have seen throughout the video. Feel free to reach out to us on ask.fm/mindfulmatters. And this has been a highly inspiring episode. I thank you so much, for joining us here today.
We appreciate it.
And in the future, we will, of course, look to do many more episodes such as this, which I guess inspire a different train of thought, something, a bit more unorthodox. And on that note, Jazakallah, thank you for joining us on another episode of Mindful Matters. Assalamu alaikum.